to do a new song for you that I just recorded. It should be out in a week or 10 days or so. And I hope you like it. It's called Suspicious Minds. Let's get it on. Get it on, man.
He didn't like it. I mean,
he didn't like being married.
Right. He didn't want to be married. He didn't want to be married.
He didn't want to get married to her.
Worried about the potential fallout if they didn't marry. The Rockers' cook allegedly said that she found Elvis crying about the wedding.
There's no doubt about it.
Once she had a ring on her finger is when she tried to separate Elvis from us.
And when she asked why he couldn't cancel it, he said, "I don't have a choice."
What was wrong was her and Elvis had been on a 2-day flight. And when she went back upstairs, I could hear the lamps flying.
I need to interject. It wasn't because he didn't love her.
No.
He did love her.
He cared.
He didn't want to get married because he shouldn't have been there.
I think he tried, and and right after they got married, remember that, you know, he cut back on the group. You know, so I think he was trying to make that change.
Priscilla discovered that Elvis was reluctant to sleep with her after she'd gone through childbirth. He told her he wanted her to have time to recover. But as Priscilla later wrote, he had mentioned before we were married that he had never been able to make love to a woman who'd had a child. Priscilla wrote in Elvis and Me that she began taking private dance lessons when Elvis was filming Live a Little, Love a Little. She found herself deeply attracted to the instructor, known simply as Mark in the book, and she confesses to having a short affair. She implies regret, however, saying, "I came out of it realizing I needed much more out of my relationship with Elvis." Despite Priscilla's affair and Elvis's on and off relationships with his co-stars and leading ladies, the first few years they were married seemed a happy time for the couple. However, when Elvis's career took off again after his 1968 television special, he constantly toured and played in Las Vegas. Elvis had also seen other women on and off, often leaving Priscilla at home with Lisa Marie.
In Hollywood and Vegas, there were plenty of girls around.
Is your wife Priscilla with you?
No, she's not.
Hey, and welcome back to another episode of Presley Mania. We are going to continue on the Elvis and Priscilla divorce documents. We are almost completely done with them. Today we're going to go over Elvis's deposition that he gave in response to the request that Priscilla made wanting more money from him. So we're going to get, that's probably as far as I'm going to get today on those. There is quite a bit here. And when we finish with the divorce docs, then we'll have to find another hot topic to go over. But there's so much going on in the Elvis world at all times. I bet we can find something. And maybe it won't require so much reading. Okay, so let's get started. This was done in the state of Tennessee. So Elvis gave his deposition there. And this is what he had to say. I, Elvis Aaron Presley, declare, I am the petitioner in the above matter. The above matter meaning Elvis Aaron Presley and Priscilla Ann Presley's divorce. This declaration is made in opposition to the motion of respondent hereinafter referred to as Mrs. Presley. And let me just say something here. I've had several comments from you guys saying she's not Mrs. Presley. Quit referring to her as Mrs. Presley. And I get it. I don't like referring to her as that either. But that's how it's stated in these documents. So in order to read them correctly, I don't have a choice except to say Mrs. Presley. So there you are. Okay. So I left off with this declaration is made in opposition to the motion of respondent hereinafter referred to as Mrs. Presley for an order vacating the default entered in these proceedings based upon the conclusive reason, among others, that at all times since the filing of the petition for dissolution and the entity of default against her, Priscilla Ann Presley, was fully aware of the proceedings for dissolution of the marriage. At all times, she has urged and encouraged that the marriage dissolution proceedings proceed to a conclusion. I therefore direct myself to her declaration dated May 25th, 1973. Y'all ready? Here we go. Mrs. Presley states that she permitted her default to be entered because she had signed a property settlement agreement and a spousal support agreement, which she was told at the time were fair. To my knowledge, the reason petitioner permitted the default to be entered was her announced intention to me as early as Christmas 1971 that she wanted her freedom. She left our home at that time. At Christmas 1971, I had already heard about her relationship with one Mike Stone, and I asked her about Mike Stone several months later in February 1972. She expressed surprise that I had known about her relationship with Mike Stone and her desire to have a separation and her freedom. The filing of a petition for dissolution and the taking of her default was pursuant to the procedure that was outlined to be followed by Mr. Ed Hookstratton, my attorney, to which Mrs. Presley readily agreed. Throughout the period since the filing of the petition for dissolution and the entry of default, the respondent has never at any time complained that the filing of the petition for dissolution or the entry of the default was procured by any mistake, inadvertence, surprise, or excusable neglect upon her part or her attorney. Point 3. When Mrs. Presley states that she did not know the nature or value of the assets owned by me, nor that she was entitled to half of them, Declaration of Priscilla Ann Presley, May 25th, 1973, page 1, lines 11 through 13. She is not stating the basic truth or facts. My wife lived with my family before marriage. She knew of my earnings. She signed my tax returns. My wife knew that a substantial part of my assets were acquired before and after marriage. During the time I have been domiciled exclusively in the state of Tennessee, the community property system does not exist in Tennessee. And we've gone over that several times, that, Elvis had stated community property doesn't exist there. So therefore he felt like things didn't need to be split. Plus the fact, all Priscilla ever said was, I just want my freedom. I just want my freedom. That's all she said. And she always said when he came up with the spousal support and the property agreement settlement, she said, I felt it was fair. I felt it was fair. And she also said, because Elvis told her, if you need anything, I'll provide it. And he did, even so far as furnishing her apartment. So we're fixing to get into a lot of that too, and you'll see, he'll tell you. My wife was fully aware of the fact that at all times I regarded my home in Memphis as my domicile and principal place of business, even though we maintained residences elsewhere, including California. She knew, and the fact is, that except for my professional engagements, the principal part of my time when not working was spent in my home in Memphis, Tennessee, on Elvis Presley Boulevard, a street named after me, and where I have spent most of my life. Not only did I maintain my principal residence in Memphis, Tennessee, my personal manager is a resident therein. My father, Vernon Presley, and my business advisor resides in Memphis, Tennessee. My accountants are located in Memphis, Tennessee. My regular attorney's office is in Memphis, Tennessee. We have filed every tax return in Memphis, Tennessee. My voter's registration is in Memphis, Tennessee. My automobiles, with the exception of ones driven by Mrs. Presley since separation, are registered in Tennessee. Most of my personal friends, business acquaintances are located and residents in Tennessee. Notwithstanding the foregoing, when I came to California or near California, example, Las Vegas, Tahoe, for professional reasons, examples, movie or personal appearance tours, etc., my wife had requested that we have a home in California. Therefore, on each occasion when we purchased a home in California, including at 1174 Hillcrest Road, Beverly Hills, California, later at 144 Monteville Drive, Los Angeles, California, including a family residence at 845 Chino Canyon Road, Palm Springs, California, Mrs. Presley participated in the choice and the purchase thereof. She was fully aware of the cost and value thereof, and that we purchased these homes in joint names. It is therefore untrue that Mrs. Presley was unaware of the nature or extent of my assets or income. She was also advised of her rights by Mr. Hookstratton and later by Mr. Brock. Point 4. At the time, Mrs. Presley and I separated in December 1971 and subsequently in February 1972, I did not know, nor was I requested, to advise my wife that she was entitled to half of my assets. I could not conceive that this was either a fact or law, since my wife, during marriage and separation, had repeatedly stated to me that she did not wish to have any part or portion of my earnings and accumulations either prior to or subsequent to marriage, and I had always assumed as a domiciliary of Tennessee that they were my separate property. Okay, between February and July 1972, y'all listen to this one's good. I was hopeful that perhaps a reconciliation could be achieved as between Mrs. Presley and myself, when it appeared that my wife was determined to get an immediate divorce and her freedom. On my own initiative, I discussed with her during a period in mid-July 1972 the prospects of seeking a final settlement. I asked my wife what she wanted. She told me that she wanted nothing. She told me that she wanted nothing. Let that sink in. Okay? That she simply wanted her freedom, that she knew the type of person I was, and fully trusted me to provide for the reasonable needs of herself and my daughter at all times. She stated to me on the occasion of our conference in July 1972 that she wanted nothing, that she did not want any part of my property, and said further, I know what I can do and can't do. She stated that she did not want any of my accumulations, earnings, royalties, residuals, publishing rights, etc. She just wanted to live comfortably without worrying about it. Notwithstanding my wife's position, I told her that I thought she ought to be paid a cash settlement, and I suggested, without consultation with anyone, including any attorney or any person, a cash sum of $100,000. She was very happy and satisfied. My wife did not want to have or receive in distribution any of the homes we jointly or the furniture acquired. So he's saying she didn't want any of that. On the contrary, she stated that she intended to move into an apartment in the Marina Del Rey and asked that I pay for the furnishings. I readily agreed. I therefore suggested that I pay her $100,000 in cash settlement, provide her with 2 automobiles of her choosing, and also pay for the furnishing of her apartment. She told me that she was entirely satisfied with such agreement as being fair and stated to me her confidence and trust that I would always do right by her. In the meetings with myself and Mrs. Presley in July 1972, and on the occasions when we met with my attorney Ed Hook-Stratton in July 1972, Mr. Hook-Stratton and I had asked Mrs. Presley to make out a list of her needed monthly expenses of herself and our daughter, Lisa. The amounts were discussed with Mr. Hook-Stratton, and I readily agreed to her request of $1,000 a month for spousal support and $500 child support. At the same time, Mr. Hook-Stratton explained to both Mrs. Presley and myself the procedures regarding dissolution in California, including that we could obtain a quiet, no-fault divorce based in irreconcilable differences. She was advised that in order to assure her privacy and safety of our daughter, that she would assume the use of her maiden name, Bull U, and that if I filed for dissolution of our marriage, her true name and address would not be disclosed in public. She agreed thereto and understood that I would file and obtain the degree of dissolution of the marriage. In reviewing the California procedures with her, Mr. Hook-Stratton again asked whether she didn't want to reconsider the question of her marriage and the settlement, thinking of possible reconciliation. In our presence, she stated that she didn't want anything beyond the $100,000 I agreed to pay her, the combined support of $1,500 per month for spousal and child support, and stated that she had too much pride and didn't want more. She also stated that she did not want to live at our Monteville home, nor want the home and furnishings, but that if she lived in a smaller place in the marina, and if I furnished such apartment for her, she would be entirely satisfied. So, did he offer that house to her? Kind of sounds like it, doesn't it? The property settlement agreement and marital termination agreements were later prepared and signed by Mrs. Presley and myself on August 15, 1972. Mrs. Presley went to Hawaii with Mike Stone. At all times, I had believed that there was a possibility for us to reconcile and continue our marriage. But in the latter part of 1972, according to my best recollection, when Mrs. Presley was in Hawaii with Mike Stone, she called me by phone to advise that she had a quarrel with him. She then told me that she might want to come back to me. I told her and I cautioned her that she should not take that for granted. Did y'all catch all that? Since then, it is clear that neither Mrs. Presley nor I anticipate nor desire a reconciliation. Both of us concede that irreconcilable differences have resulted in an irreconcilable breakdown in our marriage. Recognizing that the marriage dissolution proceedings would go forward, at no time did Mrs. Presley ask for anything beyond which I had agreed to pay. She never complained that she got an unfair agreement. In or about December 1972 or January 1973, as a gesture of generosity and friendship, I sent her a brand new Jaguar X16, for which she thanked me. late December 1972 or January 1973, she told me that she was going to have her younger sister live with her and that she was going to seek assistance from me to furnish her a new apartment where she intended to move. In addition to the $50,000 paid her on account of the property settlement, the XJ6 automobile given to her, I estimate that I have paid directly or to her for or on account of the furnishing of her apartments in excess of $40,000. Even as late as several weeks ago in May 1973, after Mrs. Presley had employed her present counsel, she talked to me by telephone, and at that time I asked her what she wanted. Mrs. Presley told me that she did not know. I asked her whether she had spent the $50,000 that I'd given her, and she did not give me a direct answer. I asked her why she had hired an attorney at this time, and she said she needed more money. Again, she urged, I do not want to take you. I want only to know that I can live comfortably. In none of these conversations did Mrs. Presley advise me that she was imposed upon, defrauded, dissatisfied, or that any proceedings undertaken to seek a dissolution of the marriage were procured by mistake, inadvertence, surprise, or excusable neglect, and my wife affirmed that a divorce should ensue. It is clear that the legitimate objects of our marriage have ceased to exist. Mrs. Presley has not disagreed with this contention and confirms that she wishes a divorce. I am ready and willing to fulfill each and all of the executory terms of the agreements, both with respect to property settlement and the termination agreement, and otherwise to do equity. Mrs. Presley seeks more money, and in trying to achieve this result, she seeks to vacate or set aside our agreements and legal proceedings. I am unable to present any opinion in respect to the merit of my wife's legal position. I must rely upon my attorneys to present and argue our factual position and the legal consequence thereof. And he gave that deposition in June of 1973. So, I am super curious to know what you guys think about all of this. What about that phone call that she made when she was in Hawaii with Mike Stone? And they got into an argument. An argument, it must have been a bad one, because she sure wanted to leave Elvis really quickly. And now she calls him after a fight. I might want to come home. I might want to come back. Oh, really? Well, too bad. So sad. He told her, do not take that for granted. So she must have made up with Mike, and things moved on down the road. And then she said, no, I still want the divorce. In fact, I need more money. Okay, so what does Elvis do? He gives his deposition. He states why he did what he did. And next week, we're going to get into the final divorce settlement and what all she got and how it ended for her and Elvis. But you know, again, this is my opinion. I don't think it ever ended for Priscilla. Because from the day she left him, and Elvis made sure that, you know, she was taken care of and that she had transportation, she had everything. We've given all those breakdowns. You know, when all that was said and done, she takes him back to court, and it never stopped. It never, ever stopped. Elvis passes away, and she sues Vernon for child support money and stuff and she ends up getting more money from him. She takes money from Lisa's trust. I mean, it's just over and over and over. And we have gone through every single document pointing that out. You know, the trust document shows that she was receiving $900,000 a year salary for working as a trustee at EPE over Lisa's trust. It's always about money to her. So when she found out that she was not the trustee any longer after Lisa passed away, what does she do? She takes Riley to court. And so what does Riley end up doing? She settles it out of court and gives her another $1 million, and she's still getting a salary from EPE as an advisor to Riley. And from the date the document was signed, it's for 10 years she'll receive that salary, and that's redacted, so we don't know what it is. She'll receive that salary from the date she signed it to 10 years in the future or until she dies. Actually, so if she dies before the 10 years is up, then it stops. But if she lives for the next full 10 years, she'll continue to receive it for that length of time. It's a lot to digest here. I found Elvis's statements to be really upfront and honest. I loved how he said, you know, talked about the Mike Stone thing. I loved how he pointed out that, you know, he had furnished one apartment already, and then now she was asking for him to furnish another one because her sister was going to move in with her. So he said, okay. He gave her a Jaguar as a Christmas gift, December, January, belated Christmas gift, whatever. There is no way that he wasn't going to take care of her. There was none. Regardless, he would have always made sure that she and Lisa were provided for, because that's just the kind of person he was. He was the kind of person that would give a complete stranger a house. So why in the world wouldn't he take care of people who had meant something to him? And especially considering his daughter, who was everything to him. Little Lisa. He loved her. And there's no way he wouldn't have taken care of her. I hope y'all have enjoyed this segment of Presley Mania, and that you will tune in hopefully next week, for the completion of the Elvis and Priscilla divorce documents. Anyway, remember, you only get one shot at this life. Live each day to the fullest, because you never know what tomorrow's going to bring. See y'all next time. Thank you again for tuning in. Bye, everyone.